40 minutes. And I realize some of you guys are used to lectures. Some of you older guys aren't. I'm not going to be 40 minutes, I promise. In fact, I hope to be hopefully less than half that. But before I begin, I want to recognize the diversity of the group here in age. Because there's one among us who is celebrating her 88th birthday today, who is a stalwart of the Republican Party, who could probably run circles around an 18-year-old when it comes to doing a political campaign and getting out the vote. And I would like to recognize Nancy and wish you a very nice 89. What I'd like to do tonight is I want to talk to you, give you a little bit about my background, then I want to talk to you about what I think are very important Republican principles, and I want to talk to you about some issues of the day that I think are going to be very important that we need to start articulating as Republicans because they're solutions to the issues that are facing us today. And then I want to end by just giving you what I consider to be 8 strong attributes of leadership that each one of us has. A little bit about my background. I'm born and raised here. Went to high school here, and I have a confession to make for those of my lifelong Republicans in this room. When I was in high school, at Lakeland Senior High School, we didn't have much of a Republican Party, and I started the Polk County High School Young Democrats. But, to my credit, we were thrown off campus because we supported Gerald Ford for president. It was an exciting time. I went then, when I first started at Lakeland Senior High School, I met a young lady who was running for secretary of the sophomore class, and I said, hey, why don't you run for president? And she said, oh no, that's a man's job. I would much rather be secretary because I'm a girl. And I said, no, you run for president, I'll run your campaign. She did, I did, she won, and now she's my wife. So we've been politicking ever since. And when I went off to the University of Florida my freshman year, was a student senator, enjoyed it, did something very crazy when my parents wouldn't let me use the car at the end of the summer to go visit a friend somewhere, and I hitchhiked to North Carolina and hitchhiked through Auburn and fell in love with the campus at Auburn. Got to school up there and got involved and started what was known as the Alabama Student Coalition, which was a coalition of universities in the state of Alabama for student issues. And the exciting thing about this, because I share this with you, because I think that the reason you're here, although it was a wonderful dinner, and I know the speaker's not going to be as great as the dinner, but the reason you're here is because of the passion that you have for your future, your principles, and your beliefs. And when I was at Auburn University, we tried to get a bill passed by the legislature that would have allowed to have the registration of students on campus to vote. You see, you could only register to vote certain times of the year in Alabama, and you could only do it down at the courthouse. And we tried to get this bill through, and we just didn't get anywhere because it would have other repercussions well beyond students. It could take in other groups and of ethnicity and diversity, and so nothing ever happened. Last year, a year ago, I was up at a game at Auburn University, and I was at a little 7-Eleven buying something, and there on the counter was a voter registration form. To show you how far that come. But it was our passion some 30 years ago to try to get students to vote. Now the students have a voice on the city council, but it's something that we believed in back then when we were students. I hope that your passions will continue on, because you see where I'm going next is where we're going to be when we leave our legacy to you guys. And you see, I got a couple of boys too. Well, we do. 17 and 18. They're your generation. And we're leaving this generation a little bit different situation than what was left me when I was your age. You see, last year the federal government, for every $1 they spent 46 cents of that in borrowed money. Last week, Congress voted to raise the deficit limit to $1.9 trillion. You got close to a $13 trillion deficit. You calculate that out based on the census figures, it's 45,000, 46,000 if you want to round it up, per person in the United States that we owe for debt. And then when you consider those who actually pay taxes, it's well over $100,000 per person. You see, that's the legacy we're leaving you. And that doesn't even begin to touch the legacy of social policies, of entitlements. Just the debt alone should be of shock and awe to you. You see, when I went to school, I believed that education was the best investment I could make in myself. You look at my grades in undergraduate, and you'd think there was another investment you made, and darn sure wasn't grades, but I was fortunate that I worked through school, I put myself through school, and when I went to law school, I took out student loans. And it was a low-interest loan, and it helped me. If it wasn't for the student loans, we would never have made it through law school. I fortunately paid all those back, but it has by far been the best investment I've made in myself. And it also taught me a lot of things about self-determination. It taught me a lot of things about creativity. It taught me a lot of things about survival. And so as you leave here today, and as you go through your college careers, and hopefully that we will embrace principles of the Republican Party, not only as we preach them, but more importantly as we practice them, we might be able to turn some of the direction this country is going in to the far left. Those principles, we talk about them, but I just have to reinforce them, and I like to reinforce them, especially when I'm talking to the Republican crowd. We truly believe in less taxes. You see, we need to be able to keep every dollar that we possibly can, other than that which we need to give to a government to protect us in national defense, that will do essential government functions and will be able to help those take care of themselves, take care of those who can't take care of themselves. Tax Day, Tax Freedom Day is now May 29th of the year, which the Tax Foundation says that if you work from January 1 until May 29th, every dollar you earn goes to pay taxes at some level of government, federal, state, or local. That's outrageous. You see, because if you can use your dollars in your hands instead of giving it to the government to use as the government sees fit, you will be more powerful in making sure that this economy gets back to being the #1 economy. Because there's no greater vote that a consumer has than the spending of dollars. We've got to be a party of less taxes. Less taxes leads us to less government. We've got to be a party of less government. We have seen irresponsible behavior being rewarded never before like we have in the last year. AIG being bailed out. GM now being owned by the United States government. Banks being bailed out and being chosen to be the successful ones, irrespective of all those other banks who had capital, who invested wisely, who were prepared with their depositors to take on the risk necessary to get business back going again. They were not rewarded. Instead, we rewarded irresponsible behavior. And we looked at healthcare. We've layered government upon government in every facet of life, and what we have done, and we have not lessened government, we have built government, and we have allowed government to get in the business of business, which is not an essential government function, which is not going to be good for our country, which is going to do more to stifle creativity, entrepreneurship, and innovation that made this country. We've got to have less government, more individual freedoms. More individual freedoms, what we can do with our lives, what we can do with our God-given talents, we ought to be able to do. Not be kept under the bushel of the government so that our light can't shine, but rather to allow us to be all that we can be within the confines of a law that is governed by a constitution. Empowered families. You know, we need to be able to make sure that we empower our families to choose the school they want to go to choose the health care that they wish to have, to choose where they want to live, what job they want to have, and how they want to be educated. We've got to make sure that what we do, we have empowered families. Personal responsibility. The principle that we somehow or another forget about, but is so important. We've got to make sure that we reward personal responsibility. That people are accountable for their actions. Let me tell you something, guys. There ain't one of us out there that's a candidate. There's not one of us out there that's an elected official, a leader of this community that is without fault. But that doesn't mean that we're not accountable for what we are and who we are. We've got to have accountability. And the last 6 fundamental principle of us as Republicans is a strong national defense. You see, we've got to have a strong national defense because we're the only country where people are dying to actually get in.